Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of your time and spending it here with us on NACTV. I'm Eoin Devereux, reporter with the Banner Press, welcoming you to this week's edition, which will be looking at the November 22nd, 2024 newspaper. And I'm joined this week by publisher Ken Waddell. Ken, good to have you here this week.
I always enjoy being here with you, Eoin. You're a good man.
I'm sensing a touch of sarcasm. Are you?
No.
Well, I will take it as genuine then.
Okay.
I take what I can get. All right, let's talk about this week's edition of the newspaper. There was a whole heck of a lot that was going on as the snow flew in the background for Neepawa and the surrounding area. If you're local to Neepawa or the Westman region, you know that we did get hit with that first little bit of winter that passed through the area. That created a little bit of chaos, a little bit here and there behind the scenes of the newspaper. We're the story behind the stories, so we're going to share the story behind that story. The blizzard came in. We were wondering throughout the whole thing, Ken, oh geez, are we going to get able to get the physical copy of the paper up here in time? And there was a little bit of, white knuckle, like worrying about the whole process, wasn't there?
Yeah, for sure. We normally the paper comes in about 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. It's a 2-hour drive from the print plant, so they weren't able to get to the print plant until about 6 o'clock because the roads were closed. So our driver brought it up, got it here about 8 o'clock, 8:30. They started working on it a bit that night. Some of the staff put in a big push, so we're able to get some of the papers at least out on the road Thursday morning, a couple hours late. And as we speak now, there's still a few towns that we haven't been able to get to yet, but between a shortage of labor and a shortage of a van, one of our vans died in a deer accident a couple of weeks ago. And so Saturday, should have it finally done by Saturday.
Yeah, that's right. And even before we got it to print, there was a little bit of interesting sort of issues and related to the weather that we had to deal with here, in that the weather shut down the roads, which caused quite a few individuals who work for the Neepawa Banner Press to be unable to get to the Neepawa Banner Press. So we were very much a skeleton crew. On top of that, one of our consistent reporters, Casper Werhan, has been out for the majority of this week, sick with that flu that's been going around. So they were unavailable for, especially every Wednesday is our print day, where we finally finalize the paper. We put all the pages together, we edit them, we send them off, all that type of thing. It's usually a 2-person production nowadays, and this week's edition was a 1-person production.
And who was that on?
Oh, that's our trivia question for this week. Who was the one that put the freaking paper together? Well, we need Jeopardy music now. If you can play some Jeopardy music over the background, I'm going to have our editors do a little bit extra work. Or maybe the copyright. We don't want any copyright infringement, so maybe not the Jeopardy theme.
You can phone us at 476-3401 and tell us who you think put the paper together this week.
You'll win absolutely nothing, but you'll have the satisfaction of being right. But again, and the interesting thing is, Tuesday night, for some inexplicable reason, I stuck around until about 6:30 that night. I was putting together pages. I was finishing off some stories there. And if I hadn't stayed a little later on Tuesday, I am sure I would have been much more frazzled. I was frazzled, but I would have been much more frazzled on Friday when Casper called in and said, unfortunately, was sick there. Because we had about 2.5, 3 pages that still needed to be completely done. And I still had a few stories that I was working on Friday or Wednesday morning in terms of getting those done and getting them on the page. That's the little sort of interesting little background things that go on that you never see in the paper. You can't read between those lines when you're reading through an article. It's like, wow, he wrote this story like 5 minutes before he went to print. Well, actually, maybe you can. Those are the ones where you find all the spelling errors. So, but the important thing was that we were able to get it done, and we were able to get it sent off with time to spare. The hardest working man in media has done it once again. And not only that, the most what do you call it, humble man in media.
That's right.
If you can guess who that is, give us a call at 476. No. Oh, well, let's get into the actual pages of the newspaper. Our front page is actually, we've got some information in regards to some of the Christmas preparations and festivities that are going on in Neepawa. You can find that on page 1 and on page 20 of this week's edition of the Banner Press. The town of Neepawa quite busy putting up all the light displays on all the lamp posts throughout the town to give us that little festive feel, Ken.
Yeah, it's pretty nice to see the lights up and Christmas decorations all over the place and Christmas lights. We're going to have Christmas again, which is kind of comforting.
Unlike mail, Christmas is not on strike right now. Christmas has not been postponed just yet. But again, on page 20 as well, Joan Enns and some of her friends have been able to put together the wonderful little spectacular Christmas village display that goes up at the municipal office each and every year. It's a wonderful local tradition that goes on, started of course by Joan and Cecil Pittman all those years ago, and it's a nice little sort of festive thing to be able to walk by that window and see all these little miniature village things put together. If you're from Neepawa, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not from Neepawa, maybe take a drive over one of these days and see it for yourself. It's a wonderful little thing, I think. I mean, I've been here about 10 years now, Ken. I'm sort of getting used to the routines of the holidays for the town of Neepawa now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you are wondering where it is, it's in the town office, but it's right next door to the Kerr Block, Roxy Theatre, that street, and the Roxy Theatre's the Kerr Block's all decorated up, not with Christmas, but much more attractive now with the artwork there. So it's worth a little stroll along there to enjoy all the artwork.
That's right, and the snow has covered up all the potholes, so it should be a much smoother ride for you this season.
You're a cynic.
I am not cynical. I am realistic. The snow. I'm realistic. The snow did cover up the potholes, and it is a little bit smoother now.
Yeah.
What part of that statement is not true?
It's all true. It's all true.
Yes.
It's all true.
Oh, all right. Let's get into the actual news on page 1. Casper Werhan, before they fell sick, was able to get this story done, and it's related to the new art exhibit that is on display right now at Arts Forward. It's a new experience in life is what we've titled it here, and Casper talks with a couple individuals there, Leanne and Faye Cramond, who were part of putting this together. This daughter and mother-in-law duo got into art over the last few years, one during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we were all looking for something to do during that, so this is something that they just explored and became very good at. And it's wonderful to be able to share some of the visuals from it with you, as well as their stories. This type of feature we're very appreciative to be able to share with you. You can find it on page 1 and page 2 of this week's edition. And we should take a moment, actually. We are very fortunate and very lucky to have a facility like Arts Forward in a community of this size. Sometimes maybe we take that for granted, and we really shouldn't, because the variety of art and events that go on in that building on a yearly basis every week is just phenomenal. I've been to other places, other communities which have similar things, but maybe not quite even to the scope or the size of this one. So don't take it for granted if you're from the Neepawa area.
Yeah, I'm looking at the pages there, and I haven't been up to see the actual exhibit yet, but very colorful, full of meaning, and when you read the stories behind the artwork, it becomes even more meaningful. So it's a pretty neat display.
That's right. If you want a little bit of a sneak preview for it, you can go on to page 1 and page 2, where it carries over to, in this week's edition of the Banner Press, see a little bit of the art for yourself, and hopefully that intrigues you to head on down to Arts Forward and see it live and in person. Let's shift over to some of the editorial aspects of our paper, which come out each and every week. And Ken Waddell, your new column this week, I want to give you a few minutes to sort of go off on that.
Well, yeah, I can rant whenever you want, just at the drop of a hat. Anyway. No, the topic this week, I revisited probably a topic that's at least 10 years old, and that was the enforced amalgamation of municipalities. And I point out that there's still people pretty upset about that whole process that happened around 2012, 13, somewhere in there. I remember very clearly. We were covering it at the paper, and I was also mayor of Neepawa at the time. And the mandate from the province came down, the NDP government of the day, that they needed to have the municipalities amalgamate, and any municipality with less than 1,000 people would have to amalgamate with a neighboring municipality so they could get the population numbers up over 1,000. Quite a few municipalities did that. Rivers and what became Riverdale Municipality, for example, Minto Odana, Langford, North Cyprus. Quite a few did the amalgamation. Glenella, Lansdowne. And I would say it worked reasonably well, I guess. And I think a lot more municipalities, as I pointed in my column, should be amalgamated. I've long thought that Langford and Neepawa should be together, and Rosedale as well, possibly Glenella, Lansdowne, all in one. And that's a historical fact because it was bigger than that at one time as the County of Beautiful Plains way back in the day. Now that's a long time ago, I realize. But geographically it made sense then to be together, and geographically it makes sense to be together now. The problem is that rural people see their needs municipally different than they think town people do, and vice versa, and to get them to agree on policy would be maybe a bit of a tough thing to accomplish. But it's getting tough to find counselors, it's getting tougher to find staff, and there's so much to do in the rules and regulations now that you have to have really good staff. And I'm not saying that their staff aren't good, I'm just saying that they just aren't there in many cases. They're advertising all the time. There's some swapping going on. One municipality stealing a CEO from another, back and forth. And I think amalgamation will come. The rural Manitoba has been amalgamating and changing ever since 1878, when the first European settlers set foot into this part of the country, and it will continue to evolve. I'm just suggesting that people do it voluntarily rather than wait for the government to enforce it. It would be much better if it's volunteer.
Well, again, it's one of those things that about a decade ago, it was all the talk around, especially in rural areas of Manitoba, these types of forced amalgamations which occurred. And it's interesting to be able to go back and sort of look at how things transpired at the time, and how in some cases they've been successful, some cases there's still a little bit of frustration here and there, and to see the long-term impact that it could continue to contribute to us heading on down the road. Once again, you can always find Ken's column. It's on page 4 of this week's and every week's edition of the Neepawa Banner Press, along with so many other things. Rita's column as well. We have a letter this week from a representative from Minnedosa that goes in on a few federal and national and international political aspects. So I think that'll be an interesting read for you. And if you agree, well, we'd love to hear from you on that. If you disagree, we'd love to hear from you on that as well. That's what's very important about a local paper, is that this is where your voice is heard. You can always send a letter to us. We'll give that information just before the end of the show, or you can give us a call, give us some information or some story tips. It is always appreciated. So thank you very much for that. All right, let's shift over into the actual pages of the paper and some of the news-oriented aspects of it. Ken, you were out, while I was here in the office on that Tuesday working on some pages, you were out and about gallivanting with the big wigs of Neepawa and Chamber in terms of a gathering between the Chamber of Commerce and the Neepawa Town Council.
Yes, I was. I was at this meeting that the council called with the Chamber of Commerce. There wasn't a huge number of people there, but there was vigorous discussion for hour and a half. And the big topic, as Mayor Brian Headley said right near the outset of the meeting, guess what? We're talking about roads. And Roads, oh my God, it's been a battle here in Neepawa and every small town across the province and in Winnipeg and everything else. But they did finally get one block finished. It was supposed to be two, but the company ran out of time after they were kind of seconded over to Brandon to do 18th Street at the behest of the provincial government. We wrote about that a few weeks ago. So they got one block done. Now, one short block, and most of our viewers will know that block, it runs in front of the Credit Union and the Vivian Hotel and Fresh Mart and the Bamboo Block. Ellen Street, it's considered a short block, $175,000 just to pave it. That's not curb and gutter, that's not sewer and water, that's none of the underground work. It's just dig it out, level it out, pack it down, put down the pavement, $175,000. A full redo with water, sewer, and all that stuff, which should be done really, is $350,000. And so the question was, how does the town finance that? And they're talking about maybe putting in a levy of $300 per house and $1,000 per business. If they did that, they would be able to finance 2 full blocks, complete redo, every year. But that $300 would be a levy that would be on every year for however long the council puts it in place.
Right.
Probably going to get difficult to get elected on that platform because people do not want to pay more taxes, but they sure want more roads.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I mean. I was mayor twice. I mean, I went through this stuff. It's worse now because the town is bigger, growing faster. The streets are that much older.
Yeah.
I don't have the solution, but that's what it's going to cost. It's $350,000 a block to fix the streets.
Because again, let's look at the reality of the situation that we are dealing with, specifically in regards to this topic we're talking about, roads. Everything's getting more expensive. You just have to look at your grocery receipt to know that, to understand that. And it's continued to be that way the past 4 or 5 years. I feel like COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact, and in a way, very significant in terms of what we pay for everything nowadays. This is not the opinion of NACTV. This is not the opinion of the Neepawa Banner Press, and it is not the opinion of Ken Waddell. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and maybe it's not your opinion. But in my opinion, and I have been wrong before, I think, quite honestly, a lot of corporations took advantage of the opportunities from the COVID-19 break, hiatus, whatever you want to call it, that occurred throughout our country to hike up prices in an indiscriminate and ridiculous manner. I think, if you ask me if there's collusion in some of these cases, I can't say for certain there is. But I can't swipe away that there isn't, quite honestly. You just have to look at the national news with the bread corporations right now. They have been charged with cases of collusion and price fixing. If that can be done for bread, why can't it be done for other things? I'm not saying that's the case here when it comes to road work, but I'm saying this has allowed many other companies to be able to hike their prices in sort of comparison. And like, that section of road to cost that much, it didn't cost nearly that much 5 years ago.
No, I brought up a point that was given to me a few years ago, and I did preface it by saying at the meeting with the council and the chamber that this was from a person who you might think is a bit of a conspiracy theorist person, but he said that he understood from his contacts in construction and trucking and whatever, that the 3 paving companies or so that we have in Manitoba all get together down at their cottages at Lake of the Woods between Christmas and New Year's, and over a few drinks and a few meals decide how they're going to divide the province up, what they're going to bid on, what they're going to bid, and how they're going to get through this stuff. And in a way, you can't blame them. They're not going to buy more equipment if there isn't going to be more jobs. But I know for a fact that there's far less capacity in the paving system than the need is for paving in Manitoba. We know that. And so I think there's a chance here, and it was discussed a little bit at this meeting, maybe somebody's going to get financing town help, contracts, whatever, to possibly set up a paving company here locally, which would make a lot of sense. Because they could probably do work here, Carberry, Gladstone, Minnedosa, maybe as far north as McCreary, not have to travel very far, have it located here. There's certainly lots of gravel in the area, millions of tons of gravel, and it's something that needs to be looked at. I've said that for a long time. I think it needs to be looked at. I obviously don't have the money, nor the expertise, nor the youth to take on something like that. But I think there's a potential there to do things better and hopefully make a buck. Making a buck is a good thing because then you can pay off your bills.
Yeah. Because again, all of this is so frustrating. You're frustrated. I know I'm frustrated. Ken, you're probably frustrated about a lot of these things as well. And you know what? I will bet you every single representative with the town of Neepawa is frustrated with it as well. You know, in a way, we give them a little bit of grief because of all this, the cost of it, but they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. That's the reality they have to deal with. They have to figure out a way to keep things rolling and operational, and at the same time, not tax us to the hilt where we can't deal with it anymore. Like as Ken said, this $300 for a home, $1,000 for a business. Yeah, I'd be frustrated. If I were a business, I'd be extremely frustrated by that. If I were a homeowner, I'd be extremely frustrated by that. But at the same time, we are a community that is growing, expanding at such a quick degree that we don't have the means to be able to sustain it. So we've got to figure out a way to do it. We are growing. We are in the process of growing still. And there's nothing we can do to stop that. I don't think that we should stop that. Short-term pain equals long-term gain and long-term viability. If we have a strong, large population of housing, of owners, homeowners, and businesses, that's good for us when it comes down to the bottom line. But we're going to have to go through some pains, and this is the painful period right now, where some things we have to decide, this is a priority. This isn't a priority. Now, even though I want this to be done, I would prefer this to be done, I can understand why this has to take priority. And I hope that you do as well. That's just the way it is.
I read a report this week, it's a few years old now, but it was an active living and transportation report done for the town of Neepawa. And one of the things they suggested was that they make sure that they increase the number of walking paths, hiking paths, whatever, and biking paths because it would take some load and strain off the streets. Well, that's nonsense. It'll take a little bit of load, but all the traffic that you have walking and biking and hiking isn't going to account to much when your streets are being pounded by great big trucks and a lot of cars. And it's just the way it is. If you want to move goods and people around, you've got to have roads. And so to think you're going to save the world with a bike path make you feel better, but it isn't going to do much in terms of economics. But yeah, it just points to the problem. We've got a lot of repairs that need to be done. The town is 125 years old or something more than that. No, it's 145 years old now, I guess, pretty much. 1883 it was begun, and it's made a lot of progress. Way back in the day, 1960s, there was a mayor by the name of Harry Smith, and they called him Curb and Gutter Harry because he was determined that Neepawa was going to have curb and gutter. Many towns don't. Lots of towns have ditches beside the sidewalks and little bridges across those ditches. But he was determined to have curb and gutter. I don't think anybody would want to go away from curb and gutter now, but that cost a lot of money back in the day. And I hate to think what would it cost now, but it is part of that cost. Redoing streets is curb, gutter, sometimes sidewalks, water, sewer, in some cases hydro lines underneath the streets. It's there's a lot of costs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, nothing's been answered in regards to that, but it's good to see that the people in charge are talking about it and realize and understand the circumstances that we are dealing with and trying to figure it out. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, Ken Waddell has that story. It is in this week's edition of the Banner Press. We're going to close up with the last few minutes that we've got right now on a little bit more of a lighthearted story. I'm very appreciative. I had a chance recently to sit down with Grant Hurl. Sorry, I ended up coughing halfway through that.
Jaime. You mean Jaime.
Known to everyone here in Neepawa by the nickname Jaime. He's been like that for as long as anyone remembers. He is well known, a former Neepawa Sportsperson of the Year recipient, barber, one of our local barbers as well, who's had his business running for as long as I can remember, and then even further down the road than that. And of course, if you've been to any Royal Manitoba football game for the Neepawa Tigers, you've usually seen him out there in the stripes as one of the officials for those games. He's been doing it since about 1990, 1991, 3 decades worth of helping out locally. And he's finally decided, as an official, he's officially called it a career. He's retired, and I had a chance to sit down and talk with him about some of the highs and lows of being a volunteer, being a referee, one of the more thankless jobs when it comes to sports. But you wouldn't have sports, really, in the way that we know them without those individuals out there. So we're very appreciative of that. He talks about some of his positive reflections on it, some of the interesting things that he's gone through. And he sat down with me because he wanted people to understand that there is a lot you can take away from it. First off, it's a start of that road up maybe into the bigs, whether it's football, basketball, hockey. Officials are needed on each and every level. And he's seen people who have started off in the quote-unquote the minor leagues or high school and have moved on to the pros. And he cites one in the story as well. And he also says it is fun. On the local level, you know what, a little bit of grief here and there from time to time, but for the most part, people are pretty good. The coaches, the players, the parents, the volunteers, everybody involved understands that it is a thankless job from time to time, and they don't give them much grief. They understand and they appreciate those individuals that are out there. And he does hope that if you are someone who has a little bit of time and a love for a sport, any type of sport really, you might get involved in one way or another. So there's a little plug in there as well to sort of check in with Football Manitoba. Football's not your thing either, any type of sport. That type of help is always appreciated. So just a quick thank you, Jaime, for 30 years of being supportive in that way. It's been great. You've been sort of a staple for all those events since I've been here these 10 years. So thank you. We've only got a couple minutes left, so we're going to quickly talk about some of the other things we had in the paper. So much sports coverage we couldn't get to. The Neepawa Tigers hockey team was in action. The Neepawa Farmers have started the Tiger Hills, and it was a great weekend as well, Ken, for the Neepawa Titans.
Yes, it was. 2 wins, which they've carried on to for a little bit more. We'll be reading about it in next week's paper. So, it was great. They beat Dauphin, and they beat Swan River.
And Niverville.
Sorry. No, Swan River was after that, Niverville. Yeah. And Niverville's back for a game, I think, this weekend, or very soon anyway, they're coming back. Niverville's coming back here in the near future, so they're a tough team. And we just actually, something that isn't in the paper, our third goalie from Neepawa got traded to Niverville. So.
Oh, yes, that just came down the wire there.
That's not in the paper.
Yeah, so. But there's so much more we could talk about, but there's only so many minutes in a half hour. Really, just 30 of them.
Yeah.
More or less. They haven't changed. Inflation hasn't hit that number yet.
No.
But if you want to learn a little bit more, that's why you need to pick up a copy of the Banner Press.
And it's free.
It is. You can find it in Neepawa and 30 other 30
other places, yeah.
30 other locations throughout Western Manitoba. If you have a story suggestion, you can always remember to give us a call over at 476-3401 or via email at news@neepawabanner.com. Once again, that is news@neepawabanner.com. So, Ken, that about wraps it up this week. Thanks for coming in, sitting down with us.
It's good. Always good to be here.
And thank you, as always, for tuning in to the story behind the stories right here on NAC TV. Have yourselves a fantastic week.